Taleb has a core thesis that underpins his entire view on modern finance. What's taught in schools doesn't work in the real world. It actually makes you worse at investing in the real world. Finance in textbooks is full of assumptions, models, and abstract theories. It gives the students the illusion of control, predictability, and elegance. The real world is way messier. It's filled with hidden fragility, incomplete information, and complexity that we can never fully understand. In academia, risk is neat, calculable, and normally distributed. The standard deviation, it's bring down to the number. In reality, it's violent, non-linear, and full of unknown unknowns. The people teaching finance are rarely the ones exposed to it. They don't operate in the arena. They model it from a distance, but that distance creates distortion in their models, which makes them useless from a practical standpoint. Taleb calls this distortion Platonicity, and he considers this the root of the problem when fresh graduates go from academic finance into real-world finance. Platonicity is Taleb's term for the human tendency to mistake abstract models for reality. It comes from Plato's idea that ideal forms exist outside of the material world. By Taleb's framing, Platonicity is dangerous. It's not some philosophical abstract, it's operation. For example, if you remember in your corporate finance class in your MBA or undergrad, the MM model, the Morganelli and Miller model is the prime example for this. We assume a world that doesn't have incomplete information, we assume a world that has no taxes, we assume a world has no transaction costs or flotation costs. The conclusions that we get from the model, as I was studying myself, borders on science fiction. The problem is not teaching these models. We understand that these models have to be taught to students in order for them to gain a good academic foundation that allows them to transition over to the real world. The problem is, in his words, the worst risk is the one that you never see coming because your model says it doesn't exist. If we attach ourselves to academic models too much, we are blind to Platonicity, and it blinds us to real danger because the model doesn't account for them. It doesn't just apply to finance, it applies to medicine, politics, engineering, anywhere that humans build systems based on simplifications. But in finance, the feedback loops are faster and the stakes are higher. You don't need to be wrong often just for ruins in the millions to come. You just need to be wrong once. Taleb's entire framework is built on rejection of theory-first thinking. He prefers the opposite. Practice or experience in finance leads, but then after that the theory follows. In other words, use what works in reality. Don't start with a model and try to force the world to fit it. This approach is uncomfortable for academics or people coming out of college because it doesn't generate clean formulas. There's no elegance, there's no symmetry. It's full of heuristics, redundancy, trial and error, irrational behaviors that just happen to exist in the real world, but it shouldn't. But survival in finance, seeing returns over and over again, is the only test that matters for practitioners. Finance textbooks love equilibriums, optimization, and efficiency, but real markets are dynamic, path-dependent, and driven by second-order effects. What works depends on context, timing, behavior under pressure, not static inputs. If a model were to be dynamic, we will have to change the standard deviation or the values that we input into our DCFs practically almost instantly. So this is why Taleb prefers heuristics or things or thoughts that you would have while trading over models that you will learn in the classroom. Redundancy over efficiency, robustness over optimization. These are not aesthetic choices or personal trader quirks. These are evolutionary responses done in trading rooms to randomness. A trader who survives 20 years has knowledge embedded into every trade that he has ever made. That's, in his view, is considered financial wisdom. The theory often follows after. We touch a stove as a kid and we eventually go away from doing that because the stove is hot and we get burned from this. Taleb calls this via negativa, learning by subtraction. What you don't do, what you avoid, what you ignore. Those are tools that cannot really be learned in the classroom because you don't feel pain or you don't feel other people's pain, but you feel them in the real world when you make portfolio allocations or trades that go horribly wrong. In his view, that is true financial wisdom because they work under stress. At the core of Taleb's thinking is skeptical empiricism. You trust evidence, but you remain skeptical about its interpretation. You believe in the experience, but you reject naive data worship. You honor practice, but you never assume the past predicts the future. Textbooks treat past data as gospel. They backtest strategies across 30 years, plug them into spreadsheets, and claim statistical confidence. In Taleb's view, this is not true. At best, it tells you what strategies have worked in the past, and at worst, it gives you confidence in a system that doesn't apply to today's financial climate. Data without context is noise. Data without skin in the game is fraud. Theories built on data without acknowledging rare events can't be used. Skeptical empiricism is about understanding the limits of what past data can tell you. Most importantly, it forces you to ask the right question: what's the cost if this theory that I made is wrong? If the cost is ruin, basically meaning that you're out of the game because your losses are too high, the theory becomes irrelevant. It doesn't matter how elegant it is or how intuitive it feels. If it exposes you to risks that can wipe you out, then it's not useful, it's dangerous. This is why Tal treats fragility as the first principle. He doesn't argue to make better models or to get better at prediction. He argues for structure without models, systems that survive even when the models break. This mindset isn't about chasing certainty about returns, it's about building systems that can withstand uncertainty, or when bad stuff happens, like for example a financial crisis, you can withstand that uncertainty because you're robust. So of course he gives us some examples of that. For example, ignore long run averages. A 20-year DCF model sounds good in hindsight, but the world has changed in 20 years and it's very difficult to assume that the models or the figures in 2008 would still be applicable to 2025. Second, assume fat tails or tail risk distributions. Just create like a pre-mortem of sorts of what could happen if the company fails, or even good pre-mortems where positive black swans can occur, where the company might explode because of some certain event. And number 3, respect old things. If something has survived volatility, time, and randomness, it contains some sort of knowledge of X factor that theory usually ignores. Think Coca-Cola, for example, and think Warren Buffett, who have survived the financial markets for more than half a century at this point. In Tal's view, the only people that's respectable in academia are people who have placed real trades, because without it, you wouldn't be able to pass signal away from noise, and the theories that you make about the financial system without using this specific knowledge would be noise in of itself.